Hey, welcome everybody. I'm excited about this four-part series that we're working on. We've got a little over 200 people joining us today, and people are trickling in as we get started. It's right at time to start. So while we're waiting for everybody to join, just welcome. Appreciate everybody giving me part of their day to begin this journey. As Corey said, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Risk 360. Quick, if you don't know who Risk 360 is, never heard of us, what we do is kind of three sides of our business. So one thing that we do is we help organizations build and manage their security programs. And that's where a lot of the lessons for this webinar will be taken from, is just the experience that we've had over the last 7 years and 15 years for me in my career of building security programs. What does it take to go to point A to point Z? What have we learned along the way? We're also going to use this series to share some of the tools and tips and downloads and give back to you guys so you can have those. In addition to building security programs, we also assess security programs as an auditor. So we do things like SOC 2, ISO 27001, high trust, PCI DSS, the whole alphabet soup of different security requirements. And that gives us a unique perspective of what does it take to build and manage a security program, but also what does an auditor need when it comes to certifying that program. And then we have a platform, Phalanx, that we've done webinars on to help manage the whole thing. And my role at Risk 360 is to oversee a lot of that. So one of the cool things that I get to see is across thousands of assessments that we've done, hundreds of clients, helping build security programs, what are the themes, pitfalls, methodologies that work and do not work. And that's really what inspired this whole series, is to share with you all some of that knowledge that we've gained along the way. So we'll do that today. So before we get started, I mentioned this is a four-part series, but I want to talk a little bit about you and some of the assumptions I made about the people joining this and how I tried to curate the material to have the most impact on all of you. So what I think about you and how I've designed this curriculum is, first of all, most of you are GRC practitioners, leaders, your security leaders and practitioners. I mean, you're subject matter experts, either beginning your career, and many of you, based on who all signed up, are middle or late career. So you have experience, you have opinions, you've done this before. So what I'm about to share with you will probably resonate, but also not be perfectly new. So knowing that you guys already have great opinions, methodologies, you have thoughts and feelings about how you would approach things, you have past experience to pull from. This is less about giving you a brand new methodology and more about giving you guys tools. I'll share with you our methodology and things that I've seen work, but I want to give you lots of tools, lots of thinking models to make your processes better and really give you something to think about along this journey as you're building out a security program, and pull from the experience that we'll talk about from hundreds of our clients and have little insights where you say, wow, that really worked for them. We're not doing that. We should do that. Or maybe I should emphasize a little more on doing that at my organization. So those are some of our goals. This four-part series is going to be great if you're building a security program for the first time. So if your charter is to get a security program off the ground, they have pieces of security program, but it's not formalized, not systematized, here's a roadmap for you. Or if you're just looking to take your existing security program to the next level, like maybe it's more compliance right now, you want to get it up to security, or you want to take your compliance and security program to the next level, there's lots of tools in here that will help all of that. And then also, a lot of you are just curious. You're wondering if you're missing anything, or there are tools that you should be considering, methodologies that you can take away. And I hope that we can learn together with all of that. So here's a quick preview of the four-part series, and then we'll hop right in. So four-part series over the course of this year that I'll be doing. This is part one, and we're going to talk about planning and vision setting. In part two, in a couple months, we're going to talk about building a maturity roadmap. Then we'll talk about operating your program, so all the key security work streams that you need to be thinking about and some insights into those. And then we'll close it out to think about certifying your program if that's a goal that you have. Here's a timeline, so maybe grab a screenshot of this. When we go in to help organizations uplift and mature their security program or build one out for the first time, this is representative, kind of like timeline of events. So today we're going to talk about planning and vision setting, which is usually the first month or two. One thing I want to point out here is that the maturity roadmap, so thinking about things like doing an assessment, a remediation roadmap, budgeting, some of that stuff, that happens in tandem with some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, planning and vision setting. So on our second webinar that's coming up, we'll get into more maturity roadmap stuff, but keep in mind that's overlapping. Then we'll talk about, like I said, operating and certifying. But quick screenshot if you want to kind of think about this from a timeline Gantt chart perspective. So what are we talking about today? So planning and vision setting. As a security leader, how do you come up with the plan? How do you set the vision for the team, communicate what you're going to do? The way I have done this before, and our team has done this before, and I've seen great leaders start with planning and vision setting, is really three core pieces of our three core pillars to make that happen. The first step is understanding your business, and I'm going to dive into the why and the how of each of these. The second is aligning your business objectives to your security objectives, and the third piece of that is what I call the security team operating system, and that's part of the vision setting. So we'll hop into each of these, but this is our journey for today. How do you go about understanding your business? How do you align the business objectives? And then how you vision set and build something called a security team operating system. That's that ecosystem for your team to go implement a security program and have a common vision for what you're trying to do. So let's begin our journey here. Understanding your business. So I think telling someone that they need to understand their business as part of planning is obvious. Of course, no one's going to disagree with that. Of course, you need to understand your business to build a good security program. But it's the most missed thing that I see anytime that I walk into an organization and help an organization either build a security program for the first time or work with executives to upgrade their security program. And what does it mean to understand your business? Well, it means, do you understand the revenue streams? Do you understand the biggest challenges? Do you understand the internal culture? Do you understand the influencers within your organization that help make decisions? Do you understand the budgeting process? And the answer often is not really. I don't really understand how the key priorities of my business and how to directly link those back to security. So what we're going to talk about here is the how. How would you do that? How would you go about really having a methodology to understand your business so that you can build those relationships across the organization, that you have a clear understanding of your business's priorities, but also your peers within the organization, their priorities. So what does accounting care about? What does finance, sales? What are they doing as a group? And how will that influence what you're focused on as security? It'll help you build a culture of security, because obviously the more people you know, the more understanding and context you have about your business, you can embed that culture of security in the right way. And it'll also help you navigate change, because as every leader knows in security, there's going to come a time you're going to have to make asks, you're going to have to prioritize projects, you have to consider what the rest of the organization is working on, and that will go into your planning. So that's why you need to understand your organization, not just security. We'll talk about some ways to do that right now. So I think there's three ways that you can go about understanding your organization. And I think it's reading all prior work, and we'll talk about some of the things you should be reading as part of planning every year. I think it's talking to people about the business, and we'll talk about who you should be talking to and the things that you should talk to them about. And then it's taking the step of articulating that stuff to yourself and to others by summarizing it, confirming it, getting feedback on what you heard, and sharing the results. This is a lot of work. It's not to be underestimated. This takes months often of continuous work to really get this into written format to make sure you've nailed it, especially that first year. In future years, sometimes you can leverage what you learned in prior years, but this is a big effort, so don't underestimate it. So one of the things I always advise, or I have these conversations with folks when I come into the organization for the first time, and we'll just say, well, do you have an annual report? Have you read your 10K? Have you read your annual filing? Do you have access to the strategic presentations from the CEO or from the strategy team to know what they're focused on? Are you undergoing any M&A activity? Is there an internal company SharePoint with KPIs or goals and objectives? And often that's not well understood. And I think it's because as security practitioners, we fall in the trap of really being focused on a framework or being focused on a trend or just the blocking and tackling of doing the work that we do every day, that we forget to zoom out and see the big picture and think about what the company is trying to accomplish from a strategic perspective. So the first thing that I would advise you to do is just read everything you can and every year and build this into part of your habit. And if you have a team and you don't have time to read everything, maybe you divvy that up amongst the team and ask people to summarize it and share it within the team. And that includes prior audit reports, security assessments, risk assessments, pen test reports. If you have a risk register, a lot of organizations have several risk registers and different Excel sheets floating around. If you are new to the role, Do you have access to everything that your predecessor had? So maybe they were doing risk assessments and had a risk register and had strategic presentations. Also review your budget. Review if you have one, review your vendor inventory, your tool sets. You'll start really learning a lot about your security program, but also about the organization in general. And you'll start putting all the puzzle pieces together around what needs to happen, what has happened before, and how you need to move forward. We're working with a couple of clients right now, and one of the trends that a lot of tech companies are having is twofold. One, they're acquiring a lot of companies. So there are these pockets of information all over the globe and all over the organization with different apps due to mergers and acquisitions. And a lot of tech companies right now, for example, are going through layoffs or a lot of turnover in the security department. So a lot of the legacy historic information that people had in their head but never documented has left the building. So a lot of people need to do this step. They need to read everything, understand the business, how they operated their historic security program, goals and objectives, and just digest this information. So this is like a intel gathering phase where you're just trying to understand the nature of your own organization and how these puzzle pieces fit in. The second thing we talked about is talking to people beyond security. It's so easy to walk into an organization or being in your security group and not really talking to anyone outside of your department. Especially in a world of remote work where you have to really take the initiative to reach out to another department who's also busy and get their time, or you're in an office every day, but you're sit around your department and people are all over the globe and you don't have an opportunity to speak with them. So one of the things that we always do as part of our security program build outs, or when we're coaching and working with executives to talk about how they should do it, is make an inventory of all the people that they need to speak with, create an agenda, and I'll share an agenda with you here in just a second that you can download, and actively reach out to those people and just talk to them. This will inform your risk assessment downstream, but right now it's all about intel gathering. So good examples are, maybe you talk to the sales team and you ask the sales team, what products and services are we selling right now? Are we selling SaaS app? Are we selling services? Is there something new that's really profitable for the organization? So we're really marketing and pushing that, trying to sell that. What barriers to sales are we seeing? Maybe a lot of us have to answer security questionnaires or get security certifications on behalf of sales. So it's interesting to hear directly from them how security is playing into your customer's mindset. Obviously, maybe you want to talk to IT or engineering and find out how the product roadmap is fleshing out. Is security a hindrance to progress, or are you embedded in the engineering organization and helping? What are their goals and objectives? What's the big features that they're bringing to market? For example, we have a couple clients right now who are moving to federal or moving international, and that means that they have to build a standalone federal instance, or they have to build something that's ISO 27001 certified because they're going to an international market that cares about that. Or maybe you're building a healthcare product and you have to comply with HIPAA or whatever it might be. But this is just really important context. By talking to people, you'll expand your reach and understand what it is that they are focused on, so you can align that to your business objectives. We have an agenda. Corey's going to throw some documents in the webinar. So if you're attending this webinar live, you can download the documents right in the webinar, or you can go to our website and look for these. But one of the cool things that we've developed over time is just a really solid agenda to get conversations going with those people that you wouldn't otherwise talk about. We just call it risk management questions. We carry it like a conversation. So if I'm going to talk to a department head or a chief technology officer, I'm asking them things about, what are their individual and department level goals? What do they need to do more of? What do they need to do less of? What's the biggest challenges? How have they interacted with security in the past? Just those kind of questions, trying to get up to speed with what those individuals are focused on. And then later, I'll try to put it into the prism of how does that impact information security and how should I be thinking about that? But if you're at a loss and you want some guidance on the type of things that you could ask, check out this agenda. You can download it directly in the webinar. There should be a link in here. So concept number 3 when it comes to understanding your organization is summarizing and sharing the results. This is a missed step. Often you'll have the conversations, you'll have the anecdotes, you'll have a lunch with someone, but you don't take the time to document that, digest it, and put it in a consumable format for your team, but also to vet by the person that you just talked to. We actually started making this a deliverable to ourselves when we're building out security programs with clients, is to start putting together strategic documents as we carry out these meetings and summarizing the results. The format that we kind of settled on was who did I talk to, date, topic, and then telling them, like in an email or a document, hey, I heard you say that you're responsible for this. Based on our conversation, I heard you say that these are your top three priorities. After thinking about it, I think security probably supports you in these ways. How did I get that right? So it's an opportunity for a second round of conversations with some of those key stakeholders to make sure that you really heard them, that you understand their biggest problems, you got that right, and that you think you do know how security can support them if you can, and then you can share that out to your team. And this will feed directly into your risk assessment work streams. It'll feed directly into your objective setting and goal setting, and it's a really key part of driving organizational change. I think a lot of folks that I have worked with do elements of these three things, but they don't formalize them. And by taking a more formal approach on these three concepts of who you talk to, what you talk about, documenting that you talk to them, confirming it, and building it into kind of a strategic document, it'll make you more, two things that it'll do for you. One, it will formalize how you do the study of your organization. It'll make it systematized so that you can repeat it. So if you're a security leader, maybe you want to delegate this to someone later, or maybe you want to write procedures on how your team can get up to speed and bring you this information on a later date. And it will help others scrutinize what you think you heard, so you can get that feedback back from the people that you actually interviewed. This is like a sprint, so this isn't something that takes months and months. What we typically try to do is do a 2-week sprint. If you're a really big organization, maybe it's a couple of sprints where you're just doing lots of interviews and interviewing those key personnel, getting their feedback, developing relationships, documenting what you heard, putting it in like a presentation or a memo or a summary report to the team, and then spending an afternoon with the whole team and say, hey, look, this is what everyone across the organization is saying. Here's the relationships that we built. Here are the key insights. And that makes for a really cool whiteboarding session where you can start throwing up all the ideas and themes that you heard from the different department heads. Things like CTOs working on these engineering products. We're thinking about this M&A work. Historically, security has not supported the business in this way, so we need to do this later. And you have this mind map of all the things that the business has told you directly that they care about. And then you can kind of distill that based on patterns and themes that you see, and then have a second whiteboard where you start mapping that back over to the security objectives. That's a really fun exercise with the team that gets them out of the weeds of thinking about security and compliance every day and gets them into the motion of thinking about the biggest business problems that the organization's facing and how they directly map to those business problems. So that's a really fun exercise and kind of capstone project to this whole study of the organization. So if you do this right, you should have working drafts of your vision and security objectives, just like that whiteboarding session I just talked about. That should really culminate into like, okay, I think these are the 3 or 4 things the security team really needs to focus on to support the business. You should have some great relationships with folks across the business. Definitely going to have a lot better understanding and empathy with the other department heads and leaders in your business and what they're trying to accomplish. The side benefit is everyone talks about the culture of security. Well, the best way to build a culture of security is just know everybody in the business, be talking to them, have security in the forefront of their mind, and they need to know that you have their back and empathy with what they're going through, and in return, they'll give you the same. And then when you do have to push through a big project, like you have to do a certification or do a big implementation, you're going to have a lot better sense for how to navigate organizational change, because you're going to know who your champions are, who the detractors, who cares about security, who's going to give you their time, and it'll make you a much more effective organization. So don't skip this step. Number one, this understanding your organization. I see this almost always skipped, and if it's not skipped, it's at least not formalized. But formalize this process as a key part of your overall planning process every single year. So this will lead us to our second pillar for today, and that is business objective alignment. So you probably already have security objectives, but I wonder if your whole team has done the work of making sure that they directly map to something that the business wants to accomplish and that those two things are in alignment. I think there's an easy way to do this, and we'll talk about that because there's only three things I think, well, not only three things, there's three key things that I think security maps back to when it comes to a business. And what I'm going to do here in a second is talk about those three things, but also show you some examples. I went to I looked across the internet and looked for a bunch of anything that was open. So if any security teams had a vision statement published on their website, like in a wiki or an employee handbook that was public to everyone, I grabbed that and I found a couple of really good examples of big companies that had vision statements and security objectives and tied them back to business objectives. So if you want to do that, I'll show you some good examples here. But the reason you want to do that is I think it's going to focus your effort. When you think about information security in your cybersecurity program, there's literally dozens and maybe hundreds of things that you want to do. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to understand how you should dedicate your effort. Which things should you focus on? But if you know exactly what the business cares about, you can shortlist it to those three things you really need to focus on and focus on those things. You also have a lot of projects and you're probably going to be seeking funding. You're probably going to need extra resources and headcount. And you need to be able to prioritize those things. And this will help you sanity check how things should be prioritized, where you should be spending your time and where you shouldn't. Help you do things like validate return on investment. So I want to spend $100,000 on this project. Is that going to result in a return on investment for the organization, or is it not? And I should table it. Help you communicate with executives. Anyone who's ever asked for budget or tried to pitch a project to executives know how it feels to have that rejected. But often if you can put that into business terms and say, hey, look, Mr. and Mrs. Objective, I've talked to people across the business. They've all told me this is what we're trying to accomplish. You yourself have told me this is what you're trying to accomplish as a business. I'm asking you for this security project, and then here's the mapping. Here's how this helps you meet that objective. That helps a lot. And then we'll talk about motivating the team, because ultimately I think everybody in security, your whole team, no matter how big or how small, wants to know the why behind the what that they're doing. And if you can give them a clear vision of how the work that they do every day supports their business objectives, it's really motivating. So I talked about when it comes to doing that mapping, the security objective to the business objective, the way I think about it is there's really only three things that security does for the business that align to those business objectives. And it's risk management, cost and complexity reduction, revenue, and sales generation. And I'll give you some examples and show you what I mean. So most of us in the security profession, we kind of naturally think of ourselves as risk managers. We want to stop the bad guys, we want to prevent breaches, that type of stuff. That's natural. We all think we're in risk management. That's a noble and worthy cause, and we are all doing that. That's an important thing. But that's not the only thing. But this is the most intuitive. We know that we want to keep the bad guys out. We want to protect the organization from legal battles. New regulations are coming out. We want to take on projects like maturity roadmaps. We want to do pen testing. We want to identify, do threat hunting and identify emerging threats. That's right in this wheelhouse. So if your head is there and you're trying to do that kind of stuff, that's a risk management play. I found GitLab. So if you guys are ever looking for inspiration, GitLab has their handbook available to the public in a wiki, and you can go check that out. And they have a security and compliance whole section. And I was reading through that and looking at their security vision and mission statement. And I'm going to reference this one a couple times because I think they map it so clearly back to these three. And one of the things that they state really clearly is that they want to reduce the likelihood of breaches, reduce the exposure to severe vulnerabilities, and reduce the cost associated with those vulnerabilities. Well, trying to stop breaches is directly aligned to risk management. So maybe that's as you're painting the vision for your organization, make that clear that you're trying to stop breaches, protect the organization. That's a risk management alignment. So this one's intuitive. This isn't rocket science. Everybody knows they're in a risk management business. The next two are two that maybe are a little less intuitive. So the second business objective that you can almost always align to is cost and complexity reduction. And what I mean by that is a couple examples. So maybe the organization is going through a ton of compliance and regulatory requirements. They have to do SOC 2, they have to do ISO 27001, they have to do GDPR, alphabet soup of different stuff. And you come up with a strategy to make that easier to implement, easier to digest, easier to obtain the certifications, less costly for the organization. So you're reducing the burden of all the evidence collection, you're putting things into simple language. Well, that's a cost and complexity reduction objective. So that might be a great fit if your organization is currently just way overburdened with compliance. It's making engineers pull their hair out because they're gathering screenshots for several weeks a year to support an audit instead of doing engineering work. Well, you can directly map any work that you want to do to make that more efficient back to an ROI to free up those engineers. Other examples might be embedding security into the SDLC. So if you help them bring products to market faster, better, with less burden, well, that's a cost and complexity reduction. You just reduce the complexity for the engineering team, help them bring that into market. Maybe you're doing tool consolidation. Everyone's maybe if you have a budget freeze right now, you're even reducing burdens. Maybe you're taking a look at all the tools that you're using across the organization and making sure you're getting the absolute most that you can out of those. That might be a cost and complexity reduction play. So those are some clear examples. I'm going to point back to GitHub here again. So they're actually number one. I don't know if these are listed in priority for GitLab or not, but it says GitLab is a security as a business enabler with a focus on improving time to market. So new features get released faster. So they're focused on product because GitLab's a product. They want to be able to help embed security, release those to market quickly, creating product and competitive differentiation. So their security organization at least views security as a differentiator in the market that gives them a competitive advantage. Reducing internal roadblocks and delays. So if you've ever worked with engineering, sometimes security has that bad reputation of being the department of no. So their focus is helping embed themselves in security and move faster. And then improving security's risk-based approach to decision-making through decentralization and managing appropriate levels of acceptable risk. So I'm kind of curious as to what that would mean. It's probably like embedding engineers across the product organization. So it doesn't have to have a single decision maker, probably something like that. But I really like this because as I was reading through GitLab's vision, I was like, oh yeah, this is clearly a cost and complexity reduction objective. So really neat to see that out in the wild out there. The third one is revenue and sales generation. So how does security support revenue and sales generation? So things you might be doing to help with that mission is obtaining certifications. So almost always the reason that you're getting your SOC 2, your ISO, or you're doing FedRAMP is because a customer or customers are requiring that you do that. So that's a pretty clear mapping to a revenue and sales generation function. Other things that you might do is helping your organization enter new markets. And this is one of those things that why I love that first step where you go out and talk to sales and the different department heads, because you might uncover something like, oh, we're really focused on getting into the healthcare vertical. That's a huge market for us. It's a big business opportunity. Our product is perfectly fit for it. And then as a security professional, you might be thinking, wow, healthcare is really regulated. There's things like HIPAA. Maybe I have to do high trust. There's going to be nuanced security requirements. Maybe I'm going to be gathering data like PHI, and it'll spark those conversations about how you need to poise the organization to support entering that market. And now you have a whole business objective aligned to sales and revenue generation that's probably going to feed directly into projects that you wanted to accomplish anyway to boost the security of your organization. Other things you might do is work with engineering to embed security directly in the products. So maybe you're trying to figure out how to go passwordless, or maybe your product is a security product, or maybe there's different access control considerations that's going to uniquely support the customers that you're working with. So any way that you're embedding security in the product, the services, your go-to-market strategy, helping your sales team close contracts faster, building a trust center so that your organization can put its best foot forward in terms of presenting their security story, all those types of things are absolutely essential when it comes to aligning security to this business objective. One thing that we see all the time is we will come into an organization and we'll start reviewing contracts. Usually this is triggered because a new client sends a contract that has a huge security addendum. We're asked to give some feedback on it, and then we find out through the course of discussions that, oh yeah, we've already signed an addendum just like this 20 other times. And we find out, wow, okay, you have some pretty stringent security requirements with some key customers that you think you're living up to, but you're not quite living up to. You have some risk there, and then we'll have to help them close those gaps. And that's a revenue protection, kind of revenue generation play. So if any of those types of projects fall into this bucket. So as you are having conversations, you're building a vision statement, you're thinking about goals, building business cases, think to yourself, does your security objectives directly align to one of these? Risk management, cost and complexity reduction, revenue and sales generation. And if you can map that pretty clearly, then you're going to have a real good understanding of how you're supporting the organization. I'll give you two quick examples because I think these are just so clear and helpful. I'll do GitLab again because I think they coincidentally map to all three. I don't know if that was conscious or not, but they definitely did map to all three of these objectives. One is strengthen, theirs that maps to cost and complexity reduction is strengthen GitLab's enterprise grade security with a focus on achieving industry recognized security certifications, reducing the time required to pass customer security reviews. There's a typo here. This actually aligns to the revenue generating piece of the business objective. So the way they support revenue generation is getting the certifications, passing security reviews faster, increasing contract size. So obviously they view the more complex and big the client, probably the more security scrutiny they're going to put on the organization. So they're positioning themselves as a pathway to bigger contracts, which actually rings true. That's a great point. And then closing the gap between customer security requirements and GitLab's security posture. So they're aware that probably through contracts and talking to customers, that customers have very stringent security requirements, and GitLab needs to align to those if they want that revenue and sales. So I think GitLab just did a fantastic job of aligning to these. I'll give you one more example. This is actually Risk 360's. It's a little bit pared back. I shortened it a little bit just so it fit on one slide. So we're ISO 27001, 27701, and 22301. That's security, privacy, and business continuity. So we maintain something called an ISMS, and within that we have basically a vision statement for what we do. And two of the reasons when we were thinking through why we wanted to make an investment to stand up a security program and articulate that to our team were these two when it comes to customer trust. One was just leading by example. So when we were talking internally, we were like, hey, we're a security organization. We have a GRC platform. We can't not have a security program. And it would also be awkward if we weren't certified. So one of the things we want to do is eat our own dog food and lead by example to do this. And the second one was to inspire trust. Very similar to what GitLab said. Like our customers always want to know what our security program looks like before they do business with us. And we want to have trust, especially as we work with really large clients that have big due diligence requirements. So you can kind of look at our objectives too and see how they map back to those three. So if you're looking for inspiration, check those out. Maybe those will give you a path forward. So that's step two. So business objective alignment. Focus on what the business needs. Build it into your priority list. You're probably going to be cutting a bunch of stuff that you, upon reflection, realize does not fit into the security objectives. They're going to have return on investment. You're going to executive buy-in. And ultimately, like I said earlier, you're going to motivate your team because a team is very motivated when their activities directly supports the business being successful. So that's step two. So we're going to move into step three here. Step three is what I call the security team operating system. This could be a whole separate webinar, but security team operating system for me is the vision piece of it. So you've done planning and vision setting, as this session is called. So how do you do the vision setting, and how do you get the whole team running in the same direction? How do you communicate what's going on to everyone, make sure everybody understands what they need to do? And I think this is part of that playbook. So just a couple tips before we get started. So one thing that I heard years ago that really changed the way that I've tried to lead at organizations and even do consulting is this thing called the marketing rule of 7. And what the theory behind the marketing rule of 7 is that people need to hear things at least 7 times before they remember it the first time. And what that translates to is that leaders really need to be on repeat all the time. You can't do one whiteboarding session and remind everybody what the vision is. You can't tell people what the culture is one time. You can't get someone to sign off on a policy one time and expect them to remember. You really have to be on repeat. So security and your objectives and everything that you do has to be just repeated over and over and over again. For myself as the CEO at Risk 360, I kind of give the same pitch, it feels like hundreds of times, but for most of my team, it feels like the first time that they've heard it. So we build a lot of stuff into onboarding, quarterly meetings, performance reviews. We do weekly meetings. We have swag all over the office that talks about our values and our vision and our operating system that we try to instill. So as we go through the rest of this, just think about that. Like if you set a vision, you understand the organization, you have plans, and it seems like people just after a couple months fall off track, it's really because you need to be on repeat. And some of this is a tool for you to think about how you can be on repeat as a security leader. So the security team operating system. So we talked about understanding the organization. We talked about aligning it to business objectives. Now we need to figure out how to articulate some of that stuff into a concise plan as part of planning and communicate it to the team. Just a quick background. So I'm writing a book on this and also have an ebook that I'll give you guys to be able to download. You can download it in the webinar, but we'll also put up the QR code and the link. So if you want to download that later, you can. But there's a bunch of books that have influenced me over time. I'm scaling up Traction, the Flywheel. We even have conference rooms named after some of these authors. And most of these books put, they talk more about running a business than running a security team. But after doing both, running a business and helping build security programs, I realized that there was a ton of overlap between what it takes to run a business and also what it takes to run a department and a good security team. So I boiled that down into what I call the security team operating system. At Risk 360, we have a company operating system. Our departments have an operating system. We coach our clients when they're building a program to build out an operating system. We build a guide on this. But what it helps you do is have a clear objective, make sure everybody understands those objectives and rhythms, and it helps you harness your team's energy to accomplish something really important. And the security team operating system has 5 components to it. There's a vision, values, roles, rhythms, and goals. And we're going to talk about those 5 and explain a little bit about how each of those play into your planning process and why this is a key step. We do have an operating system at Risk 360. We've implemented it elsewhere. We do workshops with customers to implement this type of operating system. So I'm going to try to pull from some of those examples to explain exactly how this plays out in real life to impact the performance of your organization and in the planning process. So the first concept is vision. The vision is really everything we just talked about, boiled down into a vision statement and clear objectives. I gave you 2 examples, how GitLab did that and also how Risk 360 did that. But for your own organization, do you have a clear vision statement, a clear set of objectives that you can point back to, clear objectives that you can point back to for your security organization that let you know if you're aligned? Are you headed in the right direction? Are you doing the right thing? And I'm not talking about goals. I'm not talking about achieving certification or implementing a product. I'm talking about a vision. Like what are you there to do? And how does that align back to one of those business objectives that we're talking about? Your vision's probably not going to change that often. It's going to change maybe once a year, maybe every other year, but it's going to largely remain intact. And it's something that as a security leader, you're probably going to be on your stump. You're going to be communicating that up to executives on repeat, letting them know why you're important. You're going to be firing your team up, letting them know why they should be proud of being part of the security organization. And it's something people are going to really get to know, and you repeat it all the time. And what I find when I walk into organizations, everybody has a sense for why they're doing what they're doing. They have anecdotes, they've talked about it, but it's not documented and it's not clearly communicated, and it's almost never understood by everybody. And this is your opportunity to really put that vision statement on paper and communicate it to everybody. If you need a template for this, I have a download coming. There's a whole guide that we wrote called the Security Team Operating System. So if you're like, how do I get started? How do I put words on paper? When I get done with this section, I'll leave it up on the screen for a while, but you can download that guide and it'll walk you through exactly how to do vision and everything else we're about to talk about. So vision is number 1. Get everything that we just talked about into paper. The second concept is values. Sometimes this feels a little corny or a little it's like, how does values play into what I'm doing as a business and why do I need them? But I guarantee you they're really, really important. And this is where you can really talk about what are the acceptable rules of behavior for your security team. And I put this in the planning section because it's the perfect place to talk about this every year. It's like, what are we all about? What are we here to do? And maybe you're inheriting these values from the organization because you're already really well aligned to them, or maybe you have a subculture that has a slightly different set of values. So at Risk 360, we have 5 core values. and they're more meaningful than the word would imply. They're great craftsmanship, steadfast, freedom, and team. And how we've built them into organizations, our organization, is we've built them into the hiring process. We actually have a formal hiring process. We have a blog post you can go read about how we do that, where we consider these values. We build them into performance reviews. We have a decision-making framework. They're directly tied to our goals when we do goal setting, and just the culture, like rules of acceptable behavior, how we hold each other accountable is built into that. And this is another one of those great whiteboarding sessions that you can do to have some great team building opportunity with your team. What we did for our security team and what we've done with other clients is we get a whiteboard or a big piece of paper, and we hand everybody sticky notes, and we just tell everybody, all right, write down your top 5 values, like what's important to you. It could be a sentence, it could be a word, and we give them like maybe a week to finish that and just think about it. Right, whole stack of white sticky notes. Then we get a whiteboard, and we enable columns 1 through 5, and then we get everybody to just kind of anonymously go up to that whiteboard and put their sticky notes in order for them 1 through 5. And then we just look at the whiteboard and see what everybody put up there, and we talk through them. Which ones of these are important? Maybe there's a lot of overlap, so we start combining sticky notes, or maybe people are using different words to say the same thing. And then what you kind of narrow down to is a set of values and principles that everyone cares about. And it's a really cool opportunity to get to know your team, understand what you're all about, how you guys want to work together, and most importantly, hold each other accountable to something. So it's a huge culture moment for the organization that I put in the planning part of the whole building a security program, because you're building a culture, not just a security program. So consider that for yourself. Again, if you need some guidance on this, I'll give you the download here in a second so you can think about that. Third thing is more tactical in nature. So what I see at a lot of organizations is they're trying to figure out the structure of their organization as a security function. So they're thinking about security roles and security responsibilities. And for me, this is an essential part of planning. If you don't have this formally documented, then you need to document it. And if you already have something documented, you definitely need to revisit it at least once a year, and also have a formal means to communicate it across your business. So this might be, these next 2 slides in the handbook will definitely be something good to download, and I have a downloadable for this in a second. But the way that I have thought about the security function, the security operating model, and worked with other executives to think through this, is there's kind of 7 functions of a security team. You have corporate, detect and respond, GRC, product security, third-party risk, project management, and then shared responsibilities with like legal, IT, engineering, HR. So those are like the big core functions. I imagine that your organization probably has something very, very similar, if not identical to this, but you can take this as an operating model and start thinking about your core functions. And once you've identified those core pillars, or the 7 functions of your security operating model, you can dive down into each one and start thinking about the specific roles and responsibilities that might fall into that. So in this one, I said, all right, one of our pillars is detect and respond. Well, what are all the duties that the security team needs to do to support that pillar? Well, maybe there's vulnerability management, there's incident response, there's monitoring, there's a dozen other things. Then I need to think about the who does that thing. And I like an old-fashioned RACI diagram: responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, and I just start going through there. And then what comes out of doing this exercise across all 7 pillars and all the roles within those pillars is you start to uncover duplicate roles. Maybe John owns way too much, he's under-resourced, there's gaps, or maybe you've assigned things to people and they have no idea that they own that, and you need to inform them and kind of educate them they own that and how to execute it. And the other thing to uncover is that a lot of this is shared responsibilities. It's not the security department. You're collaborating with legal or HR or IT. They actually own it. You're just consulted or informed, so you need to collaborate with them. So it's a really eye-opening experience to formally document this. You can download this. We have a RACI template where we've broken out these 7 pillars and all the functions. I guess there's like 50 or 100 different functions that we've identified. So if you're just trying to think through a model of a security program for yourself and you want to begin this exercise, you can download this. It's on our website. You can download it here. Also in the webinar, if you just want to download the PDF directly. The 4th pillar, or 4th concept of your security team operating system as you're undergoing your planning journey, is your rhythms. And your rhythms is your cadences, your internal team cadences, where you communicate things over and over and you hold each other accountable. And it's usually a cadence of daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual things that you're doing. It's probably on your calendar and commandeering your team's time, and each meeting should serve a purpose. Most organizations that I work with, their rhythms are ad hoc. Like they've just kind of accumulated this body of meetings over time, and the meetings often don't serve their original purpose, or are no longer needed, or overlap with other meetings, or there's too many people invited so people don't show up, but it just gets really messy. So if you're building a security program, you need to figure out an ideal meeting rhythm for yourself. And if you already have rhythms, you need to review that at least annual to make sure they still make sense and all the right people are involved. And I'll give you a couple examples. So at Risk 360, we do this exact same thing. We have our company meeting rhythms, and then we also have department level meeting rhythms. But some of the things that we do that we found really effective is we do a all hands meeting at 10:36 a.m. every Monday, where we just do company announcements. We have quarterly team meetings where we fly everybody in and do kind of a state of the company. And then we do an annual offsite where we fly everybody in and talk about the strategy for next year. We do performance reviews mid-year, end of year, and so on. So we have all these meetings. We always communicate this into onboarding. We had to be really thoughtful about how we wanted to have these meetings, who was involved, what the company meeting rhythms versus the department meeting rhythms would look like, what their purpose was. Is it like a vision setting meeting? Is it an information meeting, collaboration meeting? Or is it no meeting at all? We cancel it and it's just an email. So those were things that we wanted to think about based on our culture, our objectives, and what made sense for us. For you guys, specific to the security apparatus, you're probably going to have something similar. You probably have like a weekly, you probably have one-on-ones. Maybe you do a quarterly strategy meeting with the team, an annual offsite, maybe doing a quarterly information risk council meeting. Maybe if you're a security executive, you have maybe monthly requirements to report to your board or something. You're going to have a set of meeting cadences, and there's data that needs to feed into those. But I highly recommend documenting that stuff and making sure it still makes sense for your organization, and having a process to communicate to everybody what those meeting rhythms are. If you need a baseline, that security team operating system guide that I'm going to share with you guys in just a minute, you can download that. There's a template meeting rhythm calendar, as well as agendas for every meeting that you can just take and make your own right in that guide. So if you're thinking about what you need to do, start there. The final piece of the security team operating system as you're doing your planning is goal setting. So one of the stories is I like to tell is, when I was doing a security assessment for a manufacturing organization many years ago, there was this plant on the Mississippi River, and I got to go kind of just do a physical on site. They were very proud of their plant, so it was kind of cool to go see all that big equipment and walk around and do a physical security inspection. But I actually got to go underground, and one of the foremen told me, he said, "Hey, we're about to actually dig out some more of the hole, and we're going to use some explosives to do that. Do you want to stick around and like see that done? It's pretty cool. It only takes a few minutes." I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I want to see this." And he showed me the explosive, which was like very, very small. It was about the size of, you could hold it in your hand for sure. It was kind of cone shaped. And he told me how that cone was going to like take out the whole side of a wall. And he says, and he explained to me, this is because it's a detonator that's dedicates all the energy to this one focused point, and it will, be very effective. And ever since I heard that story, I kind of thought, that's just like a team. If a team is all focused on different things, they're not going to be very effective. Even if everybody is running at 100% maximum capacity with full enthusiasm, but they're focused on different things, they're not going to be very effective. But if you can harness the team energy to focus on a single objective, even a small team is pretty much unstoppable. So that's where we kind of came up with this idea of goal setting as part of planning. If the security team wants to accomplish something, it needs to be perfectly nested and focused. So you need to start what we talked about. What is the vision, the long-term vision for the security organization, the business objectives that you want to accomplish? What's the annual plan to do that? Maybe what are your department teams or your security pillar teams' responsibilities? And then what are the individual goals? And as a security leader, you should be able to map every single layer back to that one thing that you want to accomplish. People's goals, department goals, your annual plan all the way up to your vision. And if you have really, really good alignment and everyone's really focused and understands the why behind what they're doing, you're going to accomplish huge things. We use a performance management tool to do that as an organization, where we clearly articulate the company's goals. We communicate them over and over, the marketing rule of 7. We align everybody's goals to those things. And it's been very, very effective to us for, as a pretty small team, to accomplish big things. So as part of your planning, you have to do this. It's a huge amount of effort. Here's an example. If you want to accomplish ISO, maybe you think about, all right, our big picture objective is to get certified. What is each of the team members doing to support that? And then when are they going to do it? So even if you don't have a platform or something, maybe it's just in a slide deck that you're nesting it up, making it clear how all the activities that your team is doing is really helping achieve these really big goals that you want to accomplish as an organization. If you want to download that security team operating system, those 5 pillars I just talked about as part of planning, you can do that here. Or if you can go to our website, look at our resources page and download this, called the security team operating system. All right, we went on a long journey here today. So let's talk about what we accomplished. So this is, as I mentioned, part 1 of a 4-part series. We're planning and vision setting. During this, we talked about understanding the business. So like talking to people, documenting it, understanding business objectives. We talked about number 2, business objective alignment. How those 3 pillars: risk management, cost and complexity reduction, revenue generation. And then we talked about vision casting for the team through a security team operating system. That is a huge body of work. Give yourself a couple months to do it and dust it off every single year. That's the key of planning. You'll notice what we did not talk about was budgeting. We didn't talk about doing a maturity assessment, building out a roadmap, pitching to your team so that get them all on board. That is exactly what we're going to talk about on June 22nd in the maturity roadmap. Remember in our Gantt chart earlier, we talked about how those overlap. So just as a little preview, everything I just talked about is a key part of planning. Your maturity roadmap stuff is going to also feed into planning, but it'll be an essential piece of that. So after planning, talking about maturity roadmap on June 22nd, we're going to talk about things like selecting the right security framework or maturity model. We're going to talk about performing the maturity assessment itself. I'm going to give you a template to perform that maturity assessment. We're going to talk about how to think about building a maturity roadmap, picking projects that align to your objectives. We'll talk about a budget. We'll also give you a budget template if you're responsible for creating that. The budget template also has like different tools by capability, so you can start thinking about that. And then we'll give you a template and talk about how you can communicate that plan to executives if you're either making a pitch or you just want to communicate your plan for the year. And between the planning section we just talked about, getting your team motivated, all the conversations that you're going to have with your team to identify business objectives, and doing your maturity roadmap, you should be really set at the beginning of the year to execute a plan. So excited about June 22nd. You guys can go ahead and mark your calendars, look for registrations for that. But that's what we'll be covering June 22nd. So that's all I have today for the first pillar of this 4-part series, planning. I'm going to pause here and open it up for questions. I think about 5 or 10 minutes for questions. So Corey, do you want to maybe take some questions from the crowd?
Yeah, guys, feel free to go ahead and ask the questions in the question section. I know we had a couple people asking during about the handouts, and they're actually part of the handout section in there. You can also visit our website at risk360.com. Resources, we have all types of ebooks, white papers you can download. Yeah, there's another question about, is it just 3 handouts? Yes, it's just 3 for this webinar. You can go to the website and download all the other content.
Yeah, and if you are looking for resources, let me give you guys a few resources too. One is Corey and our team puts out a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn. It is just a roll-up of our content. So things that we've put out over the last few weeks are all the webinars that we've recorded. There's a budget template, a security assessment template. There's like reoccurring activities for PCI, all sorts of stuff. But it's just a roll-up of our content based on a category every single week. So if you look up Risk 360 and LinkedIn, follow that newsletter because you just want all the free content we're putting out and downloadables. You can do that. You can also just go to Risk 360's YouTube channel, where we have hundreds of videos up there. And also just on the website, there's a resources tab, and then you can download stuff. So if you miss anything or I mentioned something in this webinar that you didn't quite get, you can just go to one of those places and get it.
All right, and we have a question. How do you plan for unplanned work changes which may happen during the year?
Yeah, I would say that planning and engagement with stakeholders is continuous. And that's just a mindset you're going to have to adopt. So an easy example is, you're 6 months into your year and a huge customer opportunity comes up and they're in the healthcare space and they're requiring under all circumstances that you get high trust certified or ISO certified. And then your sales team comes and says, hey, look, this is a multi-million-dollar opportunity for the organization. We got to resource this. Well, great. You're going to have to do that. So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to talk to them about the business case. Like how much money's on the line? How big of an opportunity is this really? You're going to have to put a plan together to actually execute that certification or that business objective. You're going to have to request budget. So it's like you're going to have to do a sprint of everything that we're going to talk about in this webinar and the next webinar in a condensed time period, unplanned, so that you can help meet that objective. And if that's something that your organization does frequently, I would highly recommend every year during planning, like take a percentage of your time, like 20%, and say, hey, this is just for unplanned activities. Our cup is full at 80% because we know 20% is unplanned. And the other thing you do is you're probably going to have to use third parties. I mean, that's how Risk 360 gets a lot of our business, is an organization has a rapid need to get certified or do some important project, and they have to reach out to us because they need to surge resources to do ISO or HITRUST or SOC 2 or whatever it might be. So also consider strategic partners out there. Maybe you need a surge in resources and that will help you. But just accept it as normal is the bottom line. Accept it as normal, build it into your ongoing planning process.
Okay, and we have one more question. You guys feel free to ask anyone you have. Do you have any ground rules for setting up an effective meeting?
I do. So in short, the ground rules are every meeting has a meeting agenda. Meetings start on time, they end on time, you stick to the topic in question. You avoid rants. So those are kind of like our 3 rules of thumb that most of the team abide by and kind of know by heart. They're actually in, ironically, in that download, the security team operating system. There's a whole section on like your meeting rhythms and setting up effective meetings. Check those out, and you can kind of see our ground rules in there. But we do that across the organization, and it helps us. It gives everybody permission that if someone's going on a rant, to say, hey, look, you're going on a rant. Let's get back on topic, or stop showing up on. Always show up on time, please. So those are some of the ground rules that we use.
All right, cool. One more question, and guys, feel free. We only have 3 minutes left. If you have any questions, please let us know. Is there any standards that you use for setting goals, like SMART goals versus KPI-driven type goals?
I guess not officially that I use. Like I do always mentally come back to the SMART goals because I think that's a good format to set a goal that makes sense. I've used pieces of what they call OKRs or KPIs. So yeah, I mean, I think everything needs to be time bound, needs to be specific, needs to be measurable, needs to be assigned to someone, and needs to be a due date. So really, SMART goals is probably the thing I come back to mentally, and that we train the team on informally. So I would go with that if I had to pick like a goal setting principle.
Okay, and actually that's our last question. Well, thank you, Christian. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I hope you appreciate the content. There will actually be an email sent out tomorrow at 1 p.m. with the video recording of this session. So if you want to share it with your colleagues, please feel free to do it.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time.